then you do the next thing, then you do the next thing. Okay. Now, what happens is this. I am going to. Let's see. I'm going to show you how to use this thing here. This thing is called a vise. Okay. Vise is used for clamping your workpiece when you are machining. Okay. Now, this is not just any ordinary vise. This is called a hydraulic vise. So when you tighten it, the first part of the tightening is your manual tightening. The second part of the tightening, you actually engage hydraulics to clamp it with a higher force. The force can be so high that it can actually deform your part. So don't overturn it. Okay, so don't overturn it. I will tell you how much is good enough. Now I'm going to issue you guys your work pieces for today, and we are going to work on this to make this part over here. Okay, this is your work piece, and when you first get your work piece, you realize that the edges here are smooth. The edges here are smooth because the way it's done is there is a die that has got this shape, and then they have semi-molten aluminum, and then they roll it through the die. Okay, and then there are many rollers to ensure that it's straight. Okay, as it cools down. Then they have a cutter that cuts it, right, into like maybe a meter long. Then the vendor, when you order this, the vendor will then further cut it into smaller pieces and give it to you. So you realize that the corners of this are nice and smooth, and you can touch them comfortably without getting hurt. Where will you get hurt? You will get hurt here, the cut edge. Okay, it's sharp and you can feel that there are some burrs. So what do we do? Whenever you take your workpiece, right, you will find that there is a file on your workbench. And you take the file, and what you do is very lightly you just remove the burrs. Okay, you just slide it over at a 45-degree angle, and then sometimes you may even want to roll over a bit so you get rid of the burrs at the top. Then it becomes, there are two reasons. The first is safety, so you don't cut your hands, right? Then you can hold your girlfriend's hands tonight, right? Then here also like that. Okay. Then after that you roll over so that it's clean. Now there is a second reason as to why we want to remove the burrs. Okay. The reason why we want to remove the burrs is because later on when we clamp on the vise, you also need to remove the burrs at the corners here. Okay. Because later on when you clamp it to the vise, if you are clamping it to the vise, the burrs may get into the way of the clamping. Even though it may not look like much, there are some burrs that are quite big and you may be off by 0.1 mm, and that will mess up your machining. So that's why you remove the burrs so that when it clamps on the whole entire surface of your workpiece. Okay. Now I would want to clamp my workpiece in this direction and sticking out, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to cut it on this face, the first cut. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the vise out a bit, so that I don't knock my hand on the spindle over here. And generally when we are securing our workpieces to the vise, okay, doing our setup, at the start of the day, we usually don't put in the tool first, because there is a possibility where you could cut yourself and you reach across to hold it. So generally we set up the workpiece first, then we set up the tool, then we do the cutting in that order. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push it further back out so that it's clearer.
This is for a phone stand.
Sorry, say again?
This is for a phone stand.
Yeah, it's part of the phone stand, yes. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to come over to this side here, and I'm going to take these two bars are what we call parallel bars. You want to make sure that they are clean, okay? And they are going to sit inside to support your workpiece. And the next thing I will do is the vise handle. Alright, the vise handle and the extension. Alright, and I can open it up. Okay, and then of course you can put this in to do it as well. You could, right? But for me, I'll just do this. And you want to make sure that your vise is clean and it has no chips. Okay, why do you want to ensure that it has no chips? Two reasons. The first reason is if there are chips, then when you clamp, your part again will be not accurately clamped, and then it will be off-sided. It may be up like that or up like that. Okay. The second thing, the chips will, when you clamp the chips together with your part, then when you remove and when the chips comes out, your part surface will be blemished. So you want to avoid that. Now, what you want to do is you want to put your parallel bar in here, okay, and then you want to have your workpiece sit on the parallel bar. Okay. Now I flush my parallel bar to the jaws of the vise. Then I'll put this workpiece in, and I just have it protrude out by 1 thumb width. This much is good enough. Okay, no need so much because if not there'll be a lot of overhang. Then what I'll do is I will tighten it with my hand first, and I press this down gently. You don't have to use a lot of strength. You just press this down firmly, and then you tighten it with your hand. Okay. Now this is the first. This is tightening by hand. The first resistance is the first lock, right? The first resistance, first lock. Then what you do is you tap it. It will overcome the initial resistance. Then it becomes loose already. Then you think that it's loose, but actually it's not loose. This is the part where when you crank, the hydraulic system pushes this further. And all you need to do is go by a quarter to half a round. You don't need much. Then you remove it. Okay? Now what happens is after this is done, you want to check that your parallel bars are not moving. If it's moving like this, right, it's not very good. So this one is a bit tight. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to use a mallet. This is my mallet. And you want to tap it firmly once or twice. And then after that you check, okay, if it's secured. Okay, this side is secured, this side is a little bit not so secured. And I tap again. Alright, it's more or less secured already, it's not moving. Okay. And then with this is good enough. Okay. So once the parallel bars are not moving, right, you don't have to pull very hard. Just give it a wiggle. Right, as long as it's not sliding back and out freely, you're okay. If it slides back and out freely, then you will need to loosen the vise, tighten it. Now, sometimes when you over tighten it, your workpiece will deflect. It will actually buckle. Then your parallel bar is not sitting on the workpiece anymore. Okay? Because it's buckled. Then when you try and hammer, no matter how much you hammer, it's not going down because it's clamped too tight already. So that's why you don't over tighten. You just go by a quarter round to a half a round max. You take it out, then you hammer. Then you'll be fine. Okay? Great.